Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today, we're going deep on Doggerland.
Doggerland.
Yeah,
Okay.
you know that lost landmass.
Right.
We've got this YouTube video making the rounds. It's called "Egyptian Map Has Sunken Land: Where They Came From."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, pretty dramatic title
Yeah, definitely piques your interest.
for sure. And it tries to connect this Doggerland to ancient maps and even Atlantis.
Atlantis, huh?
Uh,
Okay, so what kind of claims are we looking at here?
Well, they're pretty bold, I gotta say.
Okay.
But we'll be breaking them down, looking at the evidence and trying to give some context.
Sounds good. Sounds like a plan. So where do we even start with this?
Well, the video really focuses on this guy, Ptolemy.
Ptolemy.
Yeah, he was a Greco-Roman geographer, lived around the 2nd century AD,
Okay.
and he made this super detailed map of the world.
Right.
And our YouTuber friend here thinks this map, it might actually show Doggerland.
Interesting. Um, Maybe for listeners who aren't familiar, could you give us a quick rundown of what Doggerland was and kind of like where it fits into history?
Yeah, absolutely. So imagine like way back when you could just walk from England to mainland Europe.
Okay.
That was Doggerland, this huge landmass connecting Great Britain to the continent.
So like a land bridge,
Yes.
basically.
But then, after the last ice age, sea levels started rising,
Right.
and slowly Doggerland got submerged.
Submerged. Okay.
By around 6,000 BC, it was pretty much gone.
Gone. Wow. So this submerge, that's a pretty key point, right? As we look at this video's claims.
Right.
So what exactly does he point to on the map as like proof?
Well, he looks at the shapes of Scotland and Denmark on Ptolemy's map.
Okay.
They're kind of unusual, these jutting shapes,
Right.
and he thinks they could match up with where Doggerland supposedly was.
Interesting.
His idea is that Ptolemy might have used like even older maps as sources,
Oh.
maps from before the flooding.
Mm.
He even says he found like a smoking gun on the map.
A smoking gun. What do you mean?
There's this tear-off mark, and he thinks it shows that there was like an older source document.
Ah,
Oh.
okay. But it's a big jump, right? To go from a tear-off mark to like a whole lost civilization.
Yeah, I see your point.
Okay.
We got to be careful not to like jump to conclusions just from one interpretation.
Right.
But this is where it gets even more interesting.
Okay, how so?
This YouTuber, he connects Doggerland to Atlantis.
Whoa, hold on.
Yeah.
Atlantis, like the legendary lost city.
Yeah, the one and only.
Oh, okay. I got to hear this. How does he even make that connection?
Well, he argues that Doggerland, it fits some of the criteria that Plato used to describe Atlantis.
Plato, the philosopher.
Yeah, Plato. He wrote about Atlantis being located beyond the Pillars of Hercules.
Right, the Strait of Gibraltar.
Exactly. And if you're, sailing out from there, Doggerland would definitely be beyond the pillars.
I guess geographically speaking.
Right.
Yeah.
And Plato also said Atlantis was rich in metals.
Okay.
And we know Doggerland did have mineral deposits.
True. But I mean, they're fairly common, right? Doesn't automatically mean a super advanced civilization.
Yeah, that's fair. It's just like one piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
He also points out that, before it sank, Doggerland would have been pretty warm and fertile,
Okay.
which kind of matches descriptions of Atlantis being like lush and prosperous.
Right.
And he keeps coming back to that tear-off mark on the map.
Yeah.
Thinks it's proof that Ptolemy might have been using a map made by the Doggerlanders themselves, like before their civilization got wiped out.
Wow, that's quite a theory. But we really have to be careful about reading too much into these visual details on an ancient map,
Yeah,
especially one that's been copied and reproduced so many times over the centuries.
that's true.
I mean, what looks like a tear could be, damage or a copying mistake or even just something a later cartographer added.
Right. We can't just assume every little mark points to like a lost civilization.
Exactly. So, okay, let's say for a second we go with his theory.
Okay.
What does he say happened to this Doggerland civilization? How did it disappear?
Well, he brings up this thing called the Storega slide.
The Storega slide.
Yeah, it was this massive underwater landslide, happened off the coast of Norway, like around 6200 BC.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it caused this huge tsunami. like a mega tsunami.
Tsunami, wow.
Yeah, and it would have just wrecked coastlines all around the North Atlantic.
Right, including whatever was left of Doggerland.
Exactly. And he thinks this tsunami, it could have been the final blow for Doggerland,
Okay.
drove any remaining people to flee. Maybe taking their maps and knowledge with them to other places.
Like Egypt.
Yeah, like Egypt. Hence the interesting video title.
Right, right. Well, it's definitely a creative interpretation, but we got to be careful to separate fact from speculation.
For sure.
I mean, yeah, the Sarega slide would have been like devastating, no doubt.
Yeah.
But this idea of a super advanced civilization just being wiped out instantly, that's where we got to be a bit skeptical.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've laid out the main claims here,
Right.
right? The Ptolemy map, the Atlantis connection, the Starega slide as this cataclysmic event.
Right.
What are your initial thoughts on all of this?
Well, it's thought-provoking. I'll give him that.
Yeah.
I appreciate, anyone looking into these alternative historical narratives.
Yeah.
But like we've been saying, interpreting evidence, especially when you're talking about ancient maps and legends, you got to be really rigorous.
Right.
We need to dig deeper, see what, mainstream science says about Doggerland.
Yo.
Look at the archaeological evidence that's been found.
Yeah, there's a lot more to unpack here.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we'll be doing in the next part of our deep dive.
So, welcome back to our deep dive on Doggerland. Before we went down the rabbit hole of these more out there theories, we were talking about the YouTube video and the whole Ptolemy map thing.
Right, and that supposed smoking gun, the tear-off mark.
Yeah.
He was pretty sure that meant Ptolemy was working from like an even older map, maybe one from the Doggerlanders themselves. It's a cool idea, but I want to know what actual archaeologists and geologists think about Doggerland. What's the mainstream view?
Well, first off, there's no question that Doggerland existed. We've got tons of geological and archaeological evidence to prove it. The debate is more about like what kind of people lived there and how they were affected by those rising sea levels.
So nobody's really saying it was like a super advanced civilization like Atlantis.
I mean, new discoveries can always change things, but right now the general consensus is that Doggerland was mostly inhabited by Mesolithic hunter-gatherers.
They lived off the land, fished, hunted, probably moved around with the seasons and the resources.
That makes sense, yeah, for such a big area.
Exactly.
Yeah.
At its peak, Doggerland was like bigger than a lot of European countries today.
Wow.
But as the sea level rose, it gradually shrank.
Mm-hmm.
So the people living there had to adapt, or move on.
So it wasn't like a sudden disaster like the YouTuber was saying. No giant tsunami wiping everyone out.
Well, the Starega slide and the tsunami, they would have been devastating for sure.
Yeah.
But Doggerland disappearing, that was a slow process. Took thousands of years.
So they would have seen the sea coming in little by little.
Exactly. Generation after generation watching their home being swallowed by the ocean.
I can't even imagine. That must have had a huge impact on their culture, their whole worldview. Absolutely. It's hard to grasp the full impact of something like that, Such a slow but constant change. It's likely that their myths and legends would reflect that, this struggle against the rising tides. Maybe that's where some of those ideas about lost civilizations and floods came from.
Interesting. So the mainstream scientific view is pretty different from the whole Atlantis theory then.
Yeah, it is, but it's still fascinating. This idea of these advanced prehistoric civilizations, it's always cool to think about.
Yeah.
But we got to stick to the evidence, and so far the evidence for a super advanced civilization in Doggerland, it just isn't there.
Okay.
But that doesn't make Doggerland any less important.
Right. Right. We can still learn a lot from what we do have. Speaking of which, I'm still kind of hung up on that Ptolemy map.
Yeah.
The YouTuber was so sure it held some big secret.
Yeah.
What do you map experts, cartographers, what do they think about Ptolemy's work?
Well, Ptolemy was a brilliant geographer and cartographer, no doubt. His map of the world was surprisingly accurate for the time.
Right.
Especially considering what he had to work with.
I mean, he didn't have Google Maps.
No Google Maps. He was relying on traveler stories, astronomical observations, and a lot of guesswork.
Wow.
So, yeah, there are going to be inaccuracies and distortions. And remember, we're talking about a document from almost 2,000 years ago.
Right.
It's been copied and reproduced who knows how many times. And every time, there's a chance for more mistakes to creep in.
Makes sense. So those weird shapes of Scotland and Denmark could just be like errors in his data or his methods.
It's very possible, yeah.
Huh.
And that tear-off mark could be anything, a copyist's mistake,
Hmm.
damage to the original, even just a stylistic choice. We can't jump to the conclusion that every weird thing on an old map means lost civilization.
Right. We got to use critical thinking and look at all the possibilities.
Right.
It's easy to get swept up in these alternative theories,
It is.
but we got to stay grounded in the facts and the scientific process.
Absolutely. But that doesn't mean we should just dismiss alternative theories altogether.
Okay.
They can make us think in new ways, ask new questions,
Yeah.
but we got to approach them with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I appreciate you bringing that balanced perspective.
Yeah.
So, okay, maybe the YouTuber's take on the Ptolemy map doesn't hold up, but we can still learn from Doggerland. We've talked about the slow flooding, the hunter-gatherer people. What actual archaeological evidence have we found there?
That's where things get really exciting. And it goes way beyond what
Yeah.
this YouTuber was talking about. The stuff they found in Doggerland it's amazing. It's like a whole lost world.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more. So we've been talking a lot about these theories, these interpretations of Doggerland, but it's important to remember, like, this wasn't just some idea. Real people live there,
Absolutely.
and they left stuff behind.
They did. And it's incredible what they left behind. I mean, over the years, fishermen, dredging the seabed where Doggerland used to be, they've brought up these amazing artifacts. Harpoons, tools made of bone and antler, even the remains of houses.
Wow, that's incredible to think you could hold something that someone made, thousands of years ago in a place that's now like underwater.
Yeah.
What can these artifacts tell us about the Doggerland people?
Well, they give us this glimpse into a way of life that was like totally in tune with nature. These people were skilled hunters, fishermen. They really knew how to use the resources around them. We've even found evidence of pretty advanced woodworking, boat building, stuff that goes beyond the simple hunter-gatherer image.
Yeah, I think we often kind of underestimate how ingenious people were back then.
We do.
It's easy to look back and think, oh, they were less advanced. But these discoveries in Doggerland, they really challenged that.
They do. These weren't just people barely surviving. They were thriving
Yeah.
in a really challenging environment. And their story is changing how we see the whole Mesolithic period in Europe. It wasn't just about survival. There was innovation. There were complex
I
societies.
feel like Doggerland is like a key to understanding our own past. It's humbling, but it's also inspiring to think about the lives they lived, the challenges they faced. So maybe we'll never know for sure if Doggerland was like the real Atlantis. But it's clear that this lost place, it's incredibly important archaeologically and historically.
It is. It's a window into a world that's vanished, a reminder that our planet, it's full of surprises, and that there's still so much we don't know. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway from Doggerland, this sense of humility and realizing that our understanding of the past, it's always changing.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to end on. We started this deep dive looking at this pretty wild theory, but we ended up with a much deeper, more complex understanding of Doggerland. And it shows us that sometimes the most fascinating stories aren't about, lost cities or super advanced civilizations, but about how resilient humans are, how we adapt even when the world is changing around us.
Well said. And for everyone listening, I encourage you, keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep challenging what you think you know about the past. You never know what other lost worlds are out there waiting to be discovered.
Thanks for joining us on this journey to Doggerland. We hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, keep diving deeper and never stop learning.